Okay, Michael, good to have you back. And we've opened up the broadcast, so people are joining in. So we will get started in a couple of minutes.
Sounds great.
Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning and good evening. Let's get started with the webinar and the exciting topic, exciting speaker for today. We are very pleased to have Michael Eckhardt with us, joining this morning from Silicon Valley. And I'll introduce Michael in a little bit. I welcome all of you to this series of webinars from Institute of Product Leadership. An Institute of Product Leadership, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a global business school for technology and product innovators, people like ourselves working in large companies and startups, and those of us who are all responsible for building and delivering successful products to the marketplace, driving innovation inside our companies. And over the last 4 years, we've been very fortunate to work with very senior people across the organization, many companies around the world in United States, in Asia, Europe, India, of course. We've had a number of different programs that we offer, right from a 3-day workshop to an executive MBA in product leadership, which is one of the first of its kind executive management education program in the world. And we deliver programs across the world in different campuses. So that's a quick overview of Institute of Product Leadership. Welcome you to go to the website, see the programs that we offer, and learn more about what we do. Quick note about how do you get access to today's webinar content and the slides that Michael will be going through his presentation. Register for CLAP. CLAP is our continuous learning and access program. You can just go to productleadership.com/CLAP. And with this, you get an IPL education account. It's a Google education account with Google Drive storage and 24/7 access to a learning management system. So as you continue to access, attend future webinars, events, programs, all of the content from all of those events can be nicely consolidated and available online as part of your online learning library. So feel free to take advantage of that and continue to build out your learning library and set of resources from IPL. Very pleased and very excited to host Michael Eckhardt today. Michael is the co-author of Crossing the Chasm. Crossing the Chasm is the Bible of high-tech marketing and a very, very popular book across the world. It's kind of a blueprint for how do you build and deliver successful products to the marketplace. And Michael is a veteran of the industry. He lives in Silicon Valley. He works and does a lot of work with companies in Silicon Valley, but even across the world. And he's continuously traveling back and forth all around the world, speaking, conducting programs across many, many different companies. Michael is managing director at Chasm Institute, and it's a great pleasure to host Michael here. Michael has been a guest faculty at Institute of Product Leadership, and having seen Michael in person as he conducts these programs, he's a very, very dynamic speaker and really makes it very easy for people to understand complex topics. So we're very pleased to have Michael and really appreciate him taking the time out of his busy schedule to spend the next hour or so with us. So I have Michael's contact information here on the slide. If any of you would like to reach out to him after the webinar. If you are into tweeting, the Prod Leader hashtag, the handle, and the Prod Events hashtag, please use them to tweet so we can consolidate all the tweets and take a look at them. We are also going to give away 2 copies of Crossing the Chasm to 2 of our participants here on the webinar. So stay engaged, ask questions, and we are going to capture all the questions and get to them at the end, and as many of them as we can. So make this a very interactive and a productive event webinar for you. And with that, Michael, my pleasure to turn it over to you. And thanks again for taking the time to be with us today.
Sure. Thank you, Rahul. Pleasure to be here as well. And welcome. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you might be in the world these days. I will bring up my screen. Rahul, let's just do a quick audio and screen check to make sure everything's up and running. Voice quality is okay, as well as the screen available?
Yes, loud and clear, Michael. I can see your slides as well.
Fantastic. Great. Super. Okay, very good. Very good. Well, welcome to the session on what we're calling Lessons from Silicon Valley, Launch Best Practices for 2016-2017. I'm honored to be here with the Institute of Product Leadership, the IPL team, and I think doing great things both in India and worldwide with what they're doing from a product management, product leadership, and education standpoint. And might I add, a very practical education, which is even more important than anything else. In terms of the title and what we're going to be focusing on here today, our goal in the next 55 minutes is really to walk through some key frameworks, some tools, some practical applications for you in project management, product management, engineering, a whole array of different process and product roles that you might have inside of companies. The focus here is going to be on those of you that work in tech companies, as well as possibly in new ventures, and the opportunities for really improving what you're doing based on the current work as you move into 2017. So thinking through the concepts of what Raul was briefly introducing here, the first goal is we want this to be practical. So we will do between now and about 10 minutes before the hour, we'll go through the content. We'll then take 6 or 7 minutes to answer some Q&A, some questions and answers that come up through the chat, and then we'll do a wrap-up just before the hour. I know it's late in India, it's relatively early in California, and everybody else is in between somewhere, so welcome. If we think of the 3 things we want to hit on today, one is this idea about how customers adopt, and something we call the tech market model. It really models to about an 85% level of accuracy how customers behave when you launch new products. Secondly, we're going to look at the 9 key points of failure or success as you go to market. These 9 factors, typically, when you think about the products that you bring to market, whether it's a tech product or a service or a solution, a software application, whether it's B2B or B2C, there's a lot of variables. But it turns out there's 9, exactly 9 factors that drive success or failure as you go to market. And we're going to hit on those as well to really figure out how to minimize risk and maximize return, what we call time to revenue in the launch of a new product. And then third is some frameworks for more deeply understanding how customer needs, requirements, and how they react to your new solutions that go to market, whether it's in India, whether it's in Asia, Europe, US, what have you. So with that, let me get started. And the goal and our focus is really going to be, if you look at the lower right-hand side of this graphic, it's going to be to the left third, shall we call it, of what we call the adoption life cycle. This is when new products get launched that fundamentally alter or change or disrupt the marketplace. We'll be talking a bit about mature products as well, but the majority of our time will be on the early market products for sure. Just a brief background of what this is all based on in terms of what you're going to be hearing. Chasm Institute, I'm one of the managing directors there, as Raul has mentioned. I've been working with Chasm Institute for more than 15 years. We've written some books. You might have heard of some of them. Our newest book is the one that was just mentioned. That'll be a giveaway as well at the end for 2 people. We call that Crossing the Chasm 3.0. Reason for that is really the 3rd fundamental update with brand new examples from VMware, 3D printing, Google, Apple, lithium, a whole host of different new disruptive innovations that come to market. The goal is this, is that even though the books are an important background, what really matters is the work that we've done. We've worked with about 500 tech companies here in Silicon Valley, in Europe, in Asia, and elsewhere. And so what we like to think of is that what we do is really practical tools to help you accelerate what you're doing in the marketplace. We're honored that we've sold about 2 million books in total. Basically, that's really into a very, very narrow group of users. These are executives at tech companies, new venture companies, venture capitalists, product managers, and so forth. And so the goal is this. If by the end of this session, what we have met is the idea about how do you accelerate your market success in units, in licenses, in real traction with customers, then we've met our objective. That's really the goal. The other piece we're going to talk about briefly is the topic of lean and how that relates to chasm crossing. There's a lot that we see and hear about the whole lean startup notions, which are a fantastic set of, a fantastic set of capabilities. And the question is going to be, how does that relate to this idea about crossing the chasm? Are they one and the same, just different words being used by different consultants? Are they in competition with each other? And so forth. And the short answer now, we're going to get more deeply into it in a few minutes, is that they're absolutely not in competition with each other. In fact, they're actually an important sequence of things that you, in the product launch, need to be thinking about as you go to market. And that lean, in its own right, is a very important medicine for a particular set of stages in the adoption curve. And cross the chasm is for a handoff a bit later on when you're really trying to scale, build, and go with what we call the mainstream customers in the main part of the marketplace. So we'll be building on that notion as well, so that there's clarity around that as we move through the content of what we cover between now and top of the hour. The kind of companies that probably struggle with, but also are challenged with and win in the marketplace, we've done studies. Many of these are our clients, others of these are ones we've studied. But fundamentally, these are kind of the growth companies and the tech-based companies that we've worked with on the small to mid-size and growing level. We've also worked with these larger growth companies, you know, whether it's the companies here in Silicon Valley or elsewhere in the world that really try to focus on how do you bring new innovations to market in a fundamentally predictable and more systematic way. That's really the goal of everything that we do at Chasm Institute. The last introductory slide before we jump in, my work is really focused on three things. This is all I do. This is the absolute domain area that I focus on. It's really about, you know, target market success, the idea that fundamentally we need to be able to avoid what we call spray and pray, and instead have a really disciplined approach to what kind of customers you're going after and where you want 70 to 90% of your revenues to come from. There's always going to be some ancillary and surprise sales, but the real goal is what's the 70 to 90% where you really believe that customer, that user, that end result benefit is being delivered to them. The second piece is accelerating new business growth, and a highly related piece is around driving go-to-market outcomes. I went to Harvard Business School many years ago, gained a lot of good insights there, but quite frankly, what's really built the ability for Chasm Institute to, I believe, deliver value to clients and customers through our workshops and consulting is the actual on-the-ground work that we do, just like what you do in your businesses as well. Okay. So a question that comes up a lot is, of what we're going to cover, what kind of products and services does this relate to? And the answer is it relates to both B2B and B2C. Yes, each of those are different domains, where B2B could be an enterprise, it could be a small or a mid-cap, mid-sized business. B2C is more the consumer, the end customer, the mom and dad or family or individual owner-operators. But in both cases, what you're going to be seeing in our frameworks and tools today are related to both those domains. The kinds of products, and I'm hoping you probably see to a great extent your world reflected in one of these, could be software and services. These could be complex enterprise solutions, cloud and SaaS, advanced materials. Some of you might have medical devices. IoT, obviously, and a lot of the machine learning and other areas are obviously an important part of this. Could be consumer products or services and mobile technologies. The one exception where we don't believe our tools fit is if you have truly generic, we'll call them non-differentiated consumer goods, where you are selling a commodity product that you really can't distinguish from someone else. That's not a business that we focus on. It's still a viable business. You're probably competing highly on price alone. It's commoditized, and we don't believe we add value there. Where we add value, we believe, is truly on the what we'll call dynamic B2B and B2C businesses. So enough about who and what and why. Now let's jump into the frameworks and tools. And the first one is something we call the tech market model. If you've read our books, you'll be familiar with the idea that fundamentally there's different stages of life when it comes to the adoption process for customers. Some customers will ignore your offer, some will buy quite readily, and some will remain undecided for a while, causing a longer or less than ideal sales cycle. The tech market model is a reflection of how those customers behave. We'll get a bit more detailed into this in a few minutes around what the early market is, what the chasm is, what the bowling alley is, what everybody doesn't always get, which is tornado, and then fundamentally the long and potentially lucrative Main Street stage as well. And when you think about the model, there's really 5 priorities that come to play. And those 5 priorities are ones that really come through in this yellow arrow that you see. What I'm hoping is that for anybody on this webcast today, and anybody associated with IPL and the work that they're doing, there should be at least 1 or 2 or hopefully 3 of these 5 areas that resonate with you. Our view at Chasm, having done this work with tech companies, over 500 of them here in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world, is that these 5 areas are critical. They're factors that decide whether you win or lose in the marketplace with your new products. The first one is customer insight. I think that one doesn't need much more definition, although maybe it does. We're not talking about customer data. We're not talking about customer information. We're talking about insight, meaning can you understand the workflows, the behaviors, the needs, the real what we'll call pain points, the pain points that customers have that you can solve. Also, it's important to know what pain points you cannot solve so you can cross those out and not focus on the ones that don't really have meaningful value add for you. The second one, which I'm assuming many of you grapple with before launch, 2 weeks before launch, 2 months before launch, 2 quarters before launch, is what features to have in the product and which ones not to. The myth here in Silicon Valley, it is not true, is the more features, the faster you scale. In fact, what we see is complexity is one of the biggest enemies in getting across this thing we call the chasm. And that your own inherent complexity in the product areas that you launch are one of the biggest problems and impediments to real scale, not your competitors. We're going to be saying that the market risk elements and market errors and how do we avoid those, obviously part of what we're going to look at with the tech market model. And then perhaps the most important one on this page is what we call whole product launch readiness. We are not talking about product launch readiness. Almost every company thinks they're ready to launch. What we're describing is whole product. And by whole product, we're defining something slightly different, or better put, dramatically different. By whole product, what we're really talking about is not the core product, but everything required, including the core product, that allows you, and we call those the key enablers, to really win with the mainstream audience. You know, in the lean world, and it's absolutely appropriate, you know, a 70 to 80% whole product or a 70, 80% MVP, absolutely integral to early lean startup launches. But that's not what we're going to be describing here. We're going to be describing here basically the chasm crossing effort that says how do we get from the early market to the main marketplace, and there we're going to be talking about 100% minimum viable whole product, not product. And while it may seem like a semantic difference, it's much more than that. This includes any hardware required, any software, application software. Does it work and is it compliant with regulatory requirements? How about connectivity and legacy interfaces? Are there pre-sales efforts required, post-sales, any consulting? All those things are part of the insurance policy that makes the core product work. We have yet, both my colleagues and I here in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, when we do work with clients, we see some amazing core products. In fact, many of them are quite impressive, whether it's application software, cloud-based enterprise solutions, consumer apps, and so forth. But the real issue is not core. That's not where you win with. It's with the whole product, and we'll be getting more deeply into that in just a few minutes. So with that, let's now emphasize the last piece, and that is the idea about competitive positioning, and the idea that fundamentally you do not live in a vacuum. You're working with competitors. You're competing as competitors. You're partnering with companies. And the reality is that no matter who you are, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Salesforce, whether it's Tesla, the luxury electronic car company, every one of you has a competitor. And sometimes that competitor, quite frankly, is another early market player over here, or sometimes it's the status quo on Main Street. And by status quo, we mean the old way of doing something that you might not think is viable anymore, but a lot of customers, typically 80 to 90%, still prefer it because it's lower risk, it's more robust, it's proven, and it's all the things that require stability and safety for a customer standpoint. So this model, while it may seem theoretical, is highly practical in describing how you go to market, where you aim, and also where you don't aim. And so with that, let's not forget an important element of all this, which is these markets are made up of things called people. And these people are customers. And the customers have money in their pocket, but they also have a pain point, and they have workflows, and they have challenges, and they have frustrations, and they have other things going on in their life besides what you're selling them. And the reality is that about 10 to 12% of the market actually is represented by what we'll call the early market. You are not going to fulfill or make your numbers in a 1 to 2 to 3 year forecast by only winning with the early market. The other 88% plus of the marketplace are the tough customers. They're the ones that ask the tough questions, that want the ROI spreadsheets, that ask the more difficult, challenging inquiries regarding your demo. They're typically not that excited about what you have to offer. They're in some ways quite happy with what they currently have, unless there's a true pain driver that's causing them to change or need to change, even if they don't want to. And so what you're going to be hearing and seeing is the idea that techies are the forefront or the early part. Many of you here today on the webcast are techies. That's a good thing and that's a bad thing. The good thing is you understand your products. The bad thing is you may not understand as well the pragmatic marketplace over here who represent the non-techie and sometimes much more pragmatic world. Now let's be clear that the people in the main marketplace on the right-hand side, those 88%, they're smart people, engineers, technical people, IT, business leaders, but their world is not around the technology. Their world is around business and around P&Ls and profit and loss and around scalable solutions and about the pressures of competing in the marketplace, not about how exciting your product, your widget, your software actually is. And so the reality is that we need to respect the early market, but not overcompensate for our understandings there, because the reality is that the real work, the tornado, the real profitability occurs in the place. And we'll see more of that in just a few minutes. So what does all this mean? What this is really getting at is there are three fundamental questions that if you want to gain what we call market traction and revenue growth for your product launch with what we call the normal mainstream customers, there's many questions you can ask, but there's actually three of them that come to the forefront. The first one is, okay, so where on the tech market model am I competing today? This model we just talked about basically fundamentally says that you may be in different stages of this, depending on even the same product but different geography. It could be that in India versus in Japan versus in Germany versus in North America, the same product might be sitting in different places. Why? Because customers are at different levels of behavior, of readiness to buy, and so forth. One of our clients today that we're working with currently is Google, and one of their subsidiaries is Nest, which has some exciting products around, as you might know and be aware of, thermostats, smoke detection, cameras for security, and so forth. And clearly for them, much like with everybody else, their goal is to get to tornado. But that is easier said than done. And the objective is to gain traction in what we call the bowling alley first. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. For now, let's let it suffice to say that where we're competing is an important part. And this is not about where you wish you were, where you fantasize you are, where your general manager thinks you are. It's really where would customers place you on the tech market model. We'll get into that in just a minute. The second question that needs to be addressed is, given where you are in the tech market model, which target segment or target customer should I attack? And also, which one should I perhaps not attack? And by attack, we mean pursue. Put that wood behind the proverbial arrow, shall we say. And you might say, well, you know, our product is amazing. It's software for mid-sized businesses. It helps them manage their time management and expense reports, or it might help them with supply chain issues. The good news is, Michael, that our product can serve many different customers in many different ways. And my reply to that, when I have a meeting with you on that topic, I'll say, you're right, that is good news. It's also bad news. The idea that your product can do many things for many customers is one of your biggest impediments. Later, when you get to Main Street, it's absolutely fine to have that dilemma. But as you're going through the early part of the marketplace, over here on the left-hand side, trying to serve all masters at the same time, all customers at the same time, is a recipe for disaster, disappointment, and failure. And then third, the question is, if you've reconciled and answered the first two, the third one is, how do you move forward with momentum? How do you really move forward? And so the pictorial for that, if you think of those three, are the ones that we're going to center on here today. The first one is the where question. Where on the map are you competing today? Again, not where you want to be or you wish you were, but where the marketplace is you. Tesla is right here right now with the electric car example. Here in California, as you drive around, you'll see 20 to 30 to 40 Teslas on the road every day. That is not true in Boston. That may not be true in Tokyo. That may not be true in Singapore. It may vary by geography for sure. But in no place is it today tornado or Main Street. The same thing is true for some of the, we'll call them the cloud-based solutions for particularly private information areas like medical and financial, where cloud, to a great extent on the software side, is a mainstream application, but there's certain areas that are further left because of the concern about security, privacy, and all the other things required to keep something from being publicly risked in terms of documents, information, and personal care information. The second part around customer segments is, okay, you heard me say earlier, If you haven't crossed something out, if you haven't decided what not to go after as well as what to pursue, then you don't have a strategy, you have a hope. Our work, whether it was at Harvard Business School or the talks we give at Stanford or here at IPL, is around focus, around truly having the discipline to take one or two segments at the most and really driving success in those before you try to solve the bigger problems of the world, broader, more spray and pray. And then third, how do you move forward? These are the 9 points of failure. We're going to be getting into those. And fundamentally, as you look at this list, there's some fairly obvious ones, things like target customer. But target customer is not any mid-sized company with $50,000 available of discretionary income and a problem around business and P&L responsibility. It's much more narrow than that. It's typically verticals or segments. And these other 8 areas follow. We'll get much more detail into that later on. So those are the 3 questions: where, which, and how. And now let's move forward on the first question, which is really the where question. Fundamentally, as you think through the where and where on the map you actually are, it turns out, and we call this the headache slide, yes, it's true, that there's actually 14 possible stages where your solution, your product, your software, your service might be. And by the way, we often get the question about, is this related to services as well as to products? And the answer is an unequivocal yes. The only difference is that the chasm, the delay in really scaling, is longer and deeper for services than they are for products. And the reason is that at least products are tangible, but services are oftentimes intangible. And your job, if you have a service you're providing, whether it's an IT service, a business service, a supply chain service, whatever it may be, you need to productize it. You need to make it a robust, repeatable, systematic product as opposed to a service to get it across the chasm. And not from your perspective, but from the customers. And so what you'll see below in very small font, you'll see in a little bit larger rendition of this, is that there's actually 3 stages in early market. There's 1 stage called chasm. There's 3 in bowling alley, 3 in tornado, and you guessed it, 3 on Main Street. And when you can figure out where you are, that's going to help you figure out also how to accelerate and avoid the impeding of your go-to-market results as you go to market. So how does that all work? It turns out that every stage on this adoption curve has its own litmus test for what's happening in the market. There's 8 patterns. These 8 patterns are all basically fundamentally different from each other. And when you launch and how you decide where you are and how you actually move forward is going to be heavily based on where customers place you in the life cycle. And so these 8 patterns, as you think these through, these 8 patterns are basically the one that we all know and enjoy and like. And this is when the initial excitement by visionary customers is visible, vivid, and obvious. They love your demos. They love your early forays in the marketplace. They love your alphas and betas. That's not the real world. That's the first 5% of the first 11% of what we call the early market. What we're going to see is later the real world intrudes, and we see chasm. Chasm is when there are disparate pilot projects. Not desperate. Notice it's a disparate with an I, which means a variety of different projects, mostly pilot, where you're done with the early adopters and the visionaries, but the pragmatists, we'll put a P here for pragmatists, are not yet ready to buy. And those people are the ones that are the deciders, the real decision makers about whether a product scales or not. There's examples like artificial intelligence that have been sitting in the early market for 35 years without having gone across into the bowling alley. A lot of talk, a lot of promises, a lot of white papers. Now, finally, in the last 3 to 4 years, we're seeing some voice recognition and other kinds of AI applications make their way across into the bowling alley. But that's been 30 to 35 years after the initial foray in. And so what you're going to see is for each one of these areas, it turns out there's a different dynamic. One very specific one is when you get into what we call the bowling alley, you're going to see something important happen, which is not all sales reps can sell successfully. Our experience is that about 15%, in fact, it's less than or equal to 15% of sales reps in the bowling alley make up for about 85 to 90% of the volume of sales. Hey, wait a minute, what does that mean? If you're training 20 people to sell or 200 people to sell your new product and it's truly disruptive, then you're probably not putting the wood behind the right arrow. Out of those 20 or 30 or 50 sales reps, there's going to be 1/6 of them that are truly going to make up most of the volume in your business. And the reason is is because in bowling alley, it is not a transactional sale like we see on Main Street. I'll put a T there for transactional, but it's a consultative sale. It's a highly trusted advisor sale to the bowling alley customers who are buying for the first time and don't really feel or understand or have a notion of how this solution is supposed to work. And consultative selling, we'll put a C here for that, is very different from transactional selling on Main Street. And in fact, if you take some of your best sales reps from Main Street who make their numbers year after year and exceed their quota and move them into the bowling alley to sell, there's a high likelihood they will fail. Why? Because they have a very different set of requirements, specifications, and sales motions in what they do on Main Street. And so as we see, there's a complexity to this that actually masks the reality that when you launch, you need to know where you are, or else you're going to have a problem. And so fundamentally, when we think this through and describe how this all plays out, an important element of the where question is as follows, which is that this tech market model, fundamentally, as you get across into the main marketplace, that the bowling alley is made up of what we're going to call segments. These can be segments of customers. These can be verticals. These can be applications, depending on what you're selling and how you're going to market. And each one of these segments has its own set of requirements. Could be different job titles, different elements of customer behavior, different workflows. And so as we go through that, what we're going to very briefly touch on before we talk about the how and the how to move forward and accelerate is the idea that every one of these stages, and you'll be getting these slides later, as Raul has mentioned, as a clickable access point on the IPL website, is that as you think this through, that the early market and other areas that you need to answer the question about where you are. And let me be really clear on something. If you're currently working on a software application and you're working in a mid-sized company or a large corporation in Bangalore or in Mumbai or in Tokyo or in San Francisco, and your product is half done, it's still in the lab, it's still to be worked on, that does not mean you're in early market. Are you clear on that? And the reason is because you might be half done with your software app, but when it launches, it may go right to Main Street or right to bowling alley. It depends on the category of where it is, not where you are. Please be clear that that's a really important distinction. So if you're working on one of the best cloud-based apps for sales and marketing, and Salesforce is already here in what we call 5A, that stage of thriving market, and you're 50% done with your competing product, that does not mean you're in early market. You're also in 5A, but you're late to market by about 5 years. So please be clear that this tech market model is not about you and where you reside, but it's actually about where the category is that you're competing with. Hope that's clear. It's a fundamental distinction. What that also says is not every product should have a lean startup mode or even a chasm crossing mode. It depends on where you really are. And so as we toggle through the different stages quite briefly and say early market is about customers who are visionaries under the influence of what we call technology enthusiasts. That's that less than or equal to 11% of the market. They behave fundamentally differently than the rest of the market. In fact, the early market, let's be really clear on that, looks way more like a project than a product. Early market is not about products. Early market is about projects. And let me ask you a question at this stage. If you're working on a product today, or you're in engineering, or process management, or product management, or project management, and you're helping a company launch a product, let me ask you the question, is it really a product or is it a project? Wi-Fi install 10 years ago was a project. Today it's a product, one button setup. 10 years ago it was, can I get it working on a Saturday, maybe pouring over into a Sunday? And the idea is, with a screwdriver and some patience, you can get it to work. That's early market. Early market has empathy and understanding, and they actually care and value projects. The rest of the market, not so good. What they want is products. They want something they can use that doesn't cause them disruption, that doesn't cause them problems, that doesn't cause them fundamentally a different shift in their time, their effort, and the hassle they currently are putting in. And so be very careful about what we call tops-down forecasts, that when you're excited about an early market product, and your management team as well, and everybody in the room is abuzz about the launch coming up in 2 months, be very careful about what we call a tops-down forecast that's as well. In Europe, there's 350 million people in Western Europe and the EU. If only 10% of those people adopt in the first 18 months, we're going to have 35 million customers. Sounds pretty good. Those are tops-down forecasts. They don't work. You need to be bottoms-up and looking at the real problem, the pain point, and the mission-critical solution sets that you're providing. Chasm, the fundamental requirement here is that there's a wall here, and we call this the whole product barrier. And what this whole product barrier is, it keeps bad ideas, bad notions, and incomplete whole products from getting to the main marketplace. In fact, we worked with a bioscience customer about 6 months ago, and one of their molecular biologists and chemists asked us, oh, I think I understand what that wall is about. Is that a wall a semi-permeable membrane that allows certain molecules through and others it rejects? And that's exactly what it does. It rejects something along the lines of an 80% whole product. Why? Because 80% is fantastic for the early market, particularly the lean startup launches you do in what we'll call 1A and 1B. But later on, these customers here, they want proven, they want solid, they want robust, they want products, not projects. And so this idea about 100% whole product is absolutely important to make you what? To make you a safe buy. That contrasts sharply with as you move through the life cycle, whole product still matters deeply, but the decision is what are the 1 or 2 segments that you're going to focus on, not the 4 or 5. And fundamentally what we're going to say is that broad sales motions, spray and pray, is not going to work. We need to be fundamentally clear on who we're targeting. Otherwise, we don't get into later what our real goal is, which is basically the tornado and elsewhere later on in the adoption curve. So it's at this juncture that what we want to raise, and it's part of the theory and concepts and construct of what we do at Chasm Institute, is so how do these 2 methods actually compare? The lean startup piece versus the crossing the chasm. Lean startup, as you see here, is a powerful method for shortening product development cycles through business hypothesis-driven experimentation, iterative product releases, validated learning. It's the launch and learn idea, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a very powerful early notion as you go to market. Crossing the chasm is a set of frameworks and tools, not for the initial release early on in the early market, but for accelerating your go-to-market results as you're shifting from the early adopter to the main marketplace. And it's basically how do you gain success with, and a sustainable success at that, with your customers in the mainstream marketplace, and how to scale the solution. So the short answer to a very complex question is the where of where does lean and where does chasm crossing fit in. You'll see here, lean is actually the first 2 parts of early market. This is based on 155 examples we've worked with in the tech world, where the lean side is when there's early market or mid-early market. Fundamentally, those are areas, and we'll just do a little drawing here to show, it's what we call 1A and 1B. And that's fundamentally when there's early visionaries and tech enthusiasts and others who are ready to buy and who do not require a full whole product solution. They're ones who are alpha and beta test customers. They're asking for demos. But commercialization is not, meaning the monetization, the money marketplace is not the ultimate goal at this point. What you're going to see is that the chasm crossing, we'll call it CTC for short, or crossing the chasm, this kicks in 1C, and also when you're stuck in 2. So we'll put a rectangle around that and say basically fundamentally it's there. This is when you're actually looking to solidify based on 2 problems that you may be having if you're truly in what we call the early market or chasm and not able to move to the right. It's because you're lacking A, credible customer references from not other visionaries but other trusted pragmatists, and then B, you're missing what I've already determined and described as the 100% minimum viable product that we mentioned a few minutes ago. It's not good enough to have a 90% whole product for the main marketplace and say, you know, we've got everything except good pre-sales and post-sales support. We'll bring that on later. The early market didn't want that anyway and didn't need it. Turns out you're right about the latter point, but the former point says that's not a later, that's not an add-on, that's what's needed at the time of release. And so to sum all this up on the lean and the chasm crossing side is that the optimal focus for a lean startup is it's an incredible set of tools. It's a great medicine for the first 2 stages of the adoption curve if you're truly an early market. Machine learning apps for early adopting consumers, etc. Chasm crossing is really in what we're going to call 1C and 2. And so the idea is there's a handoff here that says if you take the behaviors of crossing the chasm and apply those too early over here, you're probably going to be frustrated. If you take the launch and learn idea of lean startup and try to apply that in 1C or 2 or later on, you're going to have a problem. So if Toyota, who's sitting in the mature market of 5B today, it's an absolute incongruous idea to say, let's do a launch and learn with new GPS or new electric solution sets on Main Street. The reality is that's only viable in the early market. So launch and learn is fine if you're in 1A or 1B. If you try to do launch and learn later, beyond 1A and 1B, we call it something else. We call it launch and burn. And by launch and burn is you've burned your brand, you've burned your reputation, and you've caused distrust among customers who are expecting what we call 100% whole product. So that's the idea about the where question. The second one, which is which customer segment to attack, this is an integral one. It turns out that you have to make a decision on this as a team, but it turns out that ultimately it's not just on the size of the segment. And every company that we've worked with, if you think of the examples here on the page, I'll just toggle through the build slide, whether it's Apple, whether it's VMware, whether it's Philips Medical with their external defibrillators, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Amazon, every one has had to first win and dominate what we call a beachhead segment, an initial application, before they could go and cause world domination later on. That's not well understood by many people in technology. They think Amazon became a e-commerce gorilla overnight with Jeff Bezos in the lead, or that Salesforce or that Google or that Apple did the same thing, and the answer is no. There's not a single product that's scaled from early market to tornado without first going through what we call the bowling alley as a litmus test or a test of goodness. And so this idea about we're going to be different, we're going to launch early market and have a tornado forecast, that's delusional thinking, to be quite frank. And so the issue in the early market is, you may resonate with this today, is the problem is, hey, we've got an 80% solution for many, many types of customers, but we don't have 100% of any one. We don't have a complete whole product that really drives the behavior, the thinking, and the needs of any particular type of customer. And so fundamentally, when we think this through, what that really says is that we need to finish one customer segment's requirements. Now, the truth is, if you go after two segments, it's okay. If it's more than two, you will fail. You will be overcompensating for the breadth of the market versus the narrowness of the focus of the marketplace. And so fundamentally, there's 9 criteria that help drive what it is that you're trying to accomplish in your business when you launch a product that we'll call a disruptive product into the marketplace. And what that tells us is that every one of those 9 criteria, whether it's accessible, well-funded target customer segment, whether it's is there a real pain to be solved today or in the near term, not way out there in the future, do you have the feasible whole product? Do you have the right partners and allies? And here we're not talking about sales partners. Sales partners are the next step down. This is people that are providing application software, providing support, etc. And by the way, partners and allies are not synonymous with each other. Partners are people you pay or they're compensated and paid based on you working with them and vice versa. Allies are not paid. Allies are bloggers, industry analysts, third-party recommenders. They're all the people that you need to have either positive or at least neutral in the marketplace, in social networking, on the web, that are not detractors but actually have an NPS, shall we call it, Net Promoter Score, positive on your side. And every one of these 9 areas matters deeply. You might wonder, hey, Michael, of these 9 criteria, I don't see a single one that describes what about the size of the segment. Well, it turns out that size of segment and the growth rate of the segment is a wonderful criterion, but it is not, repeat, not the first criterion. It's the last criterion. See, it's the 10th one. If you can't get, and we have a scoring capability, you'll see more of that in the book, where we score each of these 9, a 5, a 3, or a 1. And without getting into the great details here in the webcast, basically if you score all these and you get a greater than or equal to a 37 out of a 45, with 45 being the perfect score, what is 45? It's 9 times 5 is 45. As simple as that. What's not simple is how do you get to 37? And if you have a really large segment that's 5 times larger than all the others, but it scores a 22 out of 45, and you're in a meeting and somebody says, you know what, I know it's going to be tough, but we should go after that really big segment. Why? Because if we only get 5% of that segment, life's going to be pretty good. And the answer is, you're not going to get 5%. And if you do, it's going to be a painful 5% because you don't have a whole product, you don't have the right partners, you may not even have the well-funded target customers who you have access to. And so the further you get below 37, the less correlation there is with your ability to win in that segment, in that target, and so forth. And so numbers don't lie, rationale don't lie. What it really says is that if you don't have these 9 criteria as part of your toolkit for identifying what segments to go after, what target applications, what target verticals, then what you're doing is basically playing in a room with the lights dimmed too low. And so fundamentally, the goal is that can you move with momentum from point A, which is the initial, just like Amazon has, or Apple has, or Salesforce has, or Google has, or Tesla has, into the additional segment that you can dominate. And that you may not like this because this is not as interesting as going to a high volume, broad, horizontal, general purpose tornado right away. But if you truly have what we call a disruptive innovation, and remember, that's when there's a change in behavior or skill or process and you're trying to get across the chasm, then you fundamentally need what we call a bowling alley approach to the marketplace. Otherwise, you're living in a world of non-reality. And then lastly, something we hinted on, and as we wrap this up, the how question. How do we move forward? There's actually 9 parameters, 9 fundamentals that tell us whether we actually have a plan for going to market that's going to drive success or frustration and failure. And we've seen this now with so many different examples, 155 different ones. And it really says these 9 areas, they're each lined up with a set of tools. And we at Chasm have developed these tools over the past 5 to 7 years and update them every year. But every one of these basically is driven by how do customers define their motivation? How do they view the completeness of the whole product, not you? Do they like the partners you're working with? Do they want to buy from the sales channel that you're buying and selling from? Do they believe your positioning message? And is there enough viral power that allows you to move through the marketplace in a way that creates momentum and power and strength for you in the marketplace versus for competitors? And so it turns out that of all the slides that we've covered, if you want a checklist of whether or not you've answered properly, this is after, and let me emphasize, after you've decided, first of all, where you are in the adoption curve and which segment to attack, this idea about how to move forward, it turns out there's 9 questions, each one related to one of these areas. And if you, as a product launch team, can answer these 9 questions, with the primary one being, what's the specific profile, job title, department name, size of company, geography, all those things, about who the target customer is that will drive the majority, that is the 70 to 90% of your sales in the next 6 to 18 months. If you don't have that as a starting point for your strategy, then everything else is an afterthought. We get lots of emails from people saying, oh, we heard you do good work on position and messaging. Could you come in and do a workshop on that? And we say, we're happy to. But first, we're assuming you answered all these other key questions first, like who the target customer is, what their motivation for buying is, what the whole product has to be, who your and they say, you know what? Those are all kind of hard. We thought we'd start with positioning and messaging. And the answer is no, you won't. That's a recipe for failure. We got to answer these 9 questions. And even though the world is not linear, these questions have some level of linearity to them. And so as we wrap this up and begin some Q&A in a minute, fundamentally, if you're launching and you have those 9 areas, the goal is that you actually have a summary page that you can show to your general manager, to your product team, to your vice presidents that says, this is who we're launching at, this is our objectives, this is how we're going to go to market. These are all 9 areas that we have. And here's the danger. If the engineering team and the project team and the product marketing team each have their own 9-point strategy for the launch, then surrender now. It actually has to be 1 page. And then you can have 10 or 20 pages of backup, but fundamentally, with our growth company examples, we need to have people in engineering, in project management, in product marketing, and general management all agree on what that strategy looks like for launch. And so even though we go through this quite quickly here in the webcast today, the fundamentals of this are pretty onerous. It really says we've got to get good at not just product, but whole product. And we've got to get good at go-to-market strategy, not just the long-term vision. And so the errors and the missteps, the mistakes, there's plenty you can make. And in fact, great companies make errors all the time. But the real deadly mistakes are the ones when customers are disappointed, when whole product's not fulfilled, when the vendor, that's you, don't really know where you're going to market with and how you're going to go. And so in summary, before we turn on the questions and see if we have a few minutes for that, in summary, it's really where, it's which, and it's how. And core capability is around each one of these areas. So with that, let me turn it back over to Rahul Abhyankar, one of the professors at IPL, to see if any chat questions came in. And in the meantime, as we're teeing that up, the Q&A, the question and answer, we have about 5 minutes for that here. I hope this has been an interesting set of dialogue and frameworks for you. If you are on LinkedIn, we always welcome you to link in with me. If you send me a LinkedIn invite, I'll be happy to accept it. We're looking to always broaden our thinking and our thoughts around what we're doing and how we move forward. So with that, back to Rahul Abhyankar and the idea that there might be some questions or chat that we want to take on at this point.
Thank you, Michael. This was fantastic and very insightful. You know, I have read Crossing the Chasm a few times, but it's always refreshing to hear from an expert like yourselves about the technology market model and the transitions as companies go through that. We do have a bunch of questions that have come in, so thanks to all of you who have submitted questions. We will get to as many as we can. In the event that we don't get to your specific question, we'll make sure that we have answers to those and we'll post them on the website in the form of a blog. But let's take a few questions. And Michael, if any questions that you see here, looks very interesting and important for you to address, please feel free to do that as well. So let me take this first question here from Srinivas. Michael, you talked about, where are we on this, the market model, the technology adoption. And so you talked about that. But what do companies actually do in order to figure out where they are on that chasm model?
Great, got it. And is the slide set still up and running that I have from the presentation, or is that not visible?
We can turn it, make you the presenter back again, so you can.
Okay, let me do that. That would be great. That way, it'll allow me to very briefly talk that through. So, great question. The short question is. Or the short answer is to read our book, but the better answer is really this: is that fundamentally our blogs, and we have some things available on my LinkedIn page that you can go to and click on, that are utilities that will help you identify where you are. And fundamentally, if we think through the dynamics, one of the most important slides, and you'll be getting that as part of the. Let me just get to that. Is basically looking at, from a customer perspective, where you are today. And so basically one of the biggest hints we have is be careful about generalizing and saying on a worldwide basis we're in 1A or 3C or 5B. It will vary by geography. Japan had digital cameras before anybody in the US or India had them, so it was already tornado in Japan 12 years ago. Or more, while it was still early market in the U.S. So geography matters. The other important part is that really broad categories are not useful to place. So things like electric cars or enterprise cloud software, those are too broad. We need to get it down one level to enterprise software for financial reporting for large corporates in Western Europe. Now that's something we can place. So again, the book gives some insights into that. Our blogs, if you go to my LinkedIn page, you'll find some insights into how to do the placement. And the third piece is a slide deck that you'll have available through IPL.
Great, thank you, Michael. This next question is about B2C companies from Kshitij. For B2C companies, because the numbers can be very large, is there a critical mass of adoption that we need to consider before going from one stage to the next in terms of the adoption cycle? Yeah,
great question. So on the B2C, and it may be that a majority of people on this webcast may be B2B, but the B2C piece creates a particularly important dynamic as you're looking at the slide here. And what that really says is that the B2C customers in the early market, we mentioned projects earlier. It's not so much a critical mass of how many. It may be that you've got 100 or 500 or 1,000 early adopters. The real test is going to be, and allow me to do a little bit of editing on this page, that says the most important group for B2C is the pragmatists. Why? Because pragmatists represent both the bowling alley. These are the normal customers, not the early adopters. Not the first people to buy 3D printers or wearable computing or have used other kinds of early market products. But it's both the bowling alley and tornado occur when the pragmatists are the ones that see this as a safe and robust solution. And so the short answer is even the Apple iPod back 10, 12 years ago when it first came to market went through the bowling alley. And it turns out, if we had more time, we could cover it in detail, that over 75% of the iPods sold, the music devices in the first 12 months, went into one specific segment of boys and teenage boys ages 15 to 22. And that critical mass there created the virality to go into other areas where it was college professors and college students and parents and grandparents and others, and eventually went to tornado. So the short answer is that we need to define it not just by demographics, but by the behavior of the customer in a certain region or a certain country. And that B2C, the tendency is to go too broad too quickly, and as a result end up with that spray and pray disease that I talked about earlier. Why don't we have time for, I think, one or two more, Raul, if you want to, maybe one more. And
we'll take one more question here from Dr. Balu. And the question he asks is, all this understanding and analysis about the different types of customers, is it mandatory to do all this consumer research before the start of the product development process?
Wow, what a great question that is. So the good news, bad news on this, shall we call it, is that there's two ways of approaching this. The first is to say, let's do all this good work. Let's do all this good work prior to launch. The reality is, I believe that launching and learning in the early market, if it truly is disruptive, is fine to do with limited research, that is, good test cases, early adopter cases, but that the real test is, after the first launch, how much learning has taken place, and can we now make adjustments and tune it? So what we do not suggest is to boil the ocean, that is to do complete market research on all possible segments and all possible applications for a product prior to the first launch into the early market. And the reason is that'll take you a year and a half. What we suggest is accelerated research that says pick the 2 or 3 real targets that you believe are the most viable ones and have those be the ones that can really drive success as you move through the life cycle. The one exception to that is if you're truly going after the main marketplace and you're competing with status quo gorillas on Main Street, then you really do need to have a very strong, robust market research in place because you're going after the conservative customers, not the early adopters. With that, I'll turn it back over to Raul Abiyankar. We'll be honored to answer any other questions by email as they come in. But at this point, thank you for your attention for the last 55 minutes. I hope this has been useful to you, and want to wish you incredible success and upward and good vectors in the future with your products and your careers.
Thank you, Michael. We have lots of questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the time for all of them. But as we said, we will address these questions in the form of a blog post so that we'll get to as many questions as we have come in here. Just to quickly wrap up, I know some of you may have other meetings to go on to. So just final few things here. In order to get access to Michael's presentation, sign up for CLAP, the Continuous Learning and Access Program, and you'll get information and access to the slides through the learning management system. We have 2 people that we'd like to give the book Crossing the Chasm to. The team just sent me the names, Srinivas Murthy and Iqbal Thakkar. Thanks for the questions and the participation that you've given here. And the team will reach out to you for getting your information so that we can get you the copy of the Crossing the Chasm. Few events coming up here, info sessions about our programs. October 6th, a chat with Kunal Shah, founder and chairman of FreeCharge. Some of you may be very familiar with FreeCharge in India, a very disruptive e-commerce company, and we're very fortunate to have Kunal spend some time with us to talk to us about FreeCharge and driving innovation in that space. So look forward to meeting you at some of these events. Keep a track of the events on the website. And once again, thank you for taking the time to attend. Michael, once again, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today and share a lot from your experience and your insights working across companies around the world. Really appreciate everything that you've done today. Thank you once again.
Thank you.